Perfect. You already decided?
I'm open to the conversation.
We'll call this council meeting to order at 6 p.m. That clock's a little slow, but it is 6 p.m., my computer says. Need a motion for adoption of the minutes.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held at City Hall on Monday, April 24th, 2017 be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Espy and seconded by Councillor Dreger. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have no delegations this evening, but we have a number of hearings. We'll open the public hearing for excessive animal application 2017-01 for Roseanne Harder at 158th Street Northwest. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing in favor or against? And your name, ma'am?
Roseanne Harder.
Roseanne? Would you like to take the podium?
I see according to that we've been accepted, and I thank you all very much. Our animals are very dear to us. Most of them have been rescue animals that we've slowly accumulated because my foster daughter has a big animal heart. We take very good care of our animals. The cats are all indoor cats. The dog is in an enclosed yard in the back, and they're all have received all the veterinary care they need. They've all had their shots. They've all been fixed. They're all tattooed. Any that are sick, they get immediate veterinary care. We take very good care of our animals.
Did council have any questions? Just one question. Are any of these animals temporary, or do you plan on keeping them all?
We're keeping them all.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak to the hearing? No? Okay. Yes, we've received one letter of objection.
It says, please be advised that 635-9770 Manitoba Limited supports the current animal control bylaw 02-8165, which allows for 3 animals per household. Therefore, we are in objection to the proposed excess animal permit to house up to 1 dog and 5 cats in the immediate area of the house which we own. Signed by 635-9770 Manitoba Limited.
Okay, thank you. Need a motion to close the public hearing for excess animal permit application 217-01.
Resolved that the public hearing for excess animal permit application 2017-01 Harder now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Espy and seconded by Councillor Praise. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Your Worship, bylaw number 04-8224, an amendment to the animal control bylaw number 02-8165, states that no person shall or own, harbor, keep, or have in his or her possession or control on his or her premises more than 3 dogs or 3 cats or a combination of both over the age of 6 months without obtaining an excess animal permit. The applicant has applied to be allowed to keep 1 dog and 5 cats at her residence. Letters were mailed on April 6, 2017 by regular mail to neighboring property owners within a 100-meter radius of the property. The applicant and property owner was notified the same date by registered mail of the hearing date. They were advised the hearing was scheduled for 6 p.m. on May the 8th, 2017. And all neighboring property owners have the opportunity to provide to City Council their views in writing prior to the hearing date or to appear and voice their opinions at the hearing on the proposed application. Animal Control Officer Roman Richards conducted a site inspection of the property at 150 8th Street Northwest. He found the property to be a bungalow-style home with a fenced backyard. He stated the area where the animals would be housed was clean and organized. A check found that there was animal food on the premises. The owner has 2 pet carriers for transporting the animals off the premises if necessary. All animals are spayed or neutered and have valid pet licenses. He recommended approval of the permit. Administration concurs with this recommendation. It is the administrative recommendation, and I so move the council approve the application by Ms. Harder for an excess animal permit for 1 dog and 5 cats at the property located at 150 8th Street Northwest.
Moved by Councillor Espy and seconded by Councillor Wall. Any comments or questions on the motion? Councillor Dreger?
So this application is for 1 dog and 5 cats, and as Ms. Harder has stated, her daughter has a huge heart for animals. If she should find another cat or another dog that needed a home, would she then have to come back to apply for another permit? Okay.
Yes, she would, for the record.
That is accurate.
Okay. Councillor Fraze?
This question along a similar vein. I know we're looking at a current situation with 1 dog and 5 cats. Is this conditional approval permanent, or is it a time thing?
My understanding is she plans on keeping the animals. This isn't a temporary thing, so it would be permanent until it's changed.
So she would be allowed to keep up to 5 cats indefinitely.
And 1 dog. Any, Councillor Dragon?
Thank you. Just the letter of objection that we received, it would appear that this is a rental or something of the such that Mrs. Harder may not necessarily own this property. Is that's what I would say from the letter that we received, that someone else is the owner of the property that we are speaking of.
Can you speak to that?
Can you clarify that for us?
I own my house. I don't know
Oh.
who that person is.
A neighbor that owns another property,
Okay.
from what I understand.
All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Hey, we don't know who that person is either. Can't make out the signature, there's no name.
Any further questions? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We'll open the hearing for variation PC 15-17. This is for Riverbend Orchards. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Anybody to speak to the hearing for Riverbend Orchards? Okay, I need a motion closing the hearing for PC 15-17.
Resolved that the public hearing for variation PC 15-17 Riverbend Orchards, 100 Old Bridge Road now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Fraze. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Okay, so this is an application from Riverbend Orchard, Inc. To apply for a variation for the front yard to be reduced, and the applicants wish to install solar panels. This building is in a limited agriculture zone, and the application has been circulated to the various city departments with state concerns or no concerns. Public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius. It is the recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Riverbend Orchards, Inc. to vary the front yard accessory structure requirement of 22.9 meters to be reduced to 5 meters at the property known as 100 Old Bridge Road, which is legally described as Lot 1, Plan 1809, Parish of Portage la Prairie, and I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Fraze. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We'll open the public hearing for variation PC 16-17. This is for CHB Developments. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing?
I'm here, Mayor Ferris, if there's any questions in regards to the variation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beers. Were there any questions for Mr. Beers? Okay, was there anyone else here to speak to the hearing? Okay, I need a motion to close the hearing.
Resolved that the public hearing for variation PC 16-17 CHB Developments, 426 Tupper Street North, now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Fraze. All those in favor? And that's carried.
This is another application for a reduction in rear yard requirements this time. The applicant is wishing to fit a garage onto 4th Avenue Northeast. The building is in a residential two-family zone, and the application has been circulated to various city departments with state concerns or no concerns. What does that mean exactly?
That's just a drop-down box. We're supposed to take one of them out of there.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius. It is the recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of CHB Developments, Inc. to vary the rear yard requirement of 7.5 meters down to 5.18 meters at the property known as 426 Tupper Street North, which is legally described as Lots 653, 654, Plan 66, Parish of Portage la Prairie. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Draycott. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We'll open the public hearing for variation PC 17-17. This is for Cobb's Plumbing and Heating. Is there anyone here to speak to the hearing? Yeah, I'll entertain a motion for closing the hearing.
Resolved that the public hearing for variation PC 17-17, Cobb's Plumbing and Heating, 1800 Saskatchewan Avenue East, now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Fraze. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Cobb's Plumbing and Heating Limited are applying for a variation order to allow for the side yard requirement to be reduced. The applicant wants to construct an open-face storage shelter. This building is in a C3 Avenue commercial zone, and the application has been circulated to the various city departments with no concerns. Public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius. It is the recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Cobb's Plumbing and Heating Limited to vary the side yard requirement of 4.6 meters to be reduced to 1.5 meters at the property known as 1800 Saskatchewan Avenue East, which is legally described as Lot 2, Plan 1331, Parish of Portage la Prairie, and I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Fraze. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. That concludes our hearings. We'll move right into committee, Finance, Legislative and Property Committee. Tonight, Councillor Wall for Councillor Buds.
Yes, Your Worship. This evening we have second and third reading of the financial plan and tax levy bylaw. City Council adopted the 2017 budget for the City of Portage la Prairie on February 27th, 2017. Tax levy bylaw is comprised of the 2017 budget and the financial plan and sets the mill rates needed to raise the tax dollars. The 10-year capital plan also makes up part of the financial plan. The 27 budget estimate relies on $11,270,009.24 in property taxes, including special local improvement taxes, to meet all the expenditures not recovered by other revenues. There's no increase in tax dollars raised when compared to 2016. The municipal tax rate, the mill rate, is based on the budgeted amount of tax dollars the municipality requires to meet its obligations in 2017. The total tax dollar requirement is spread over the entire assessment base for the city. The 2017 municipal tax rate is $20.762 for every $1,000 of the assessed portion that is subject to taxation. It's part of our mandate, as explained at the last council meeting, as a municipal corporation to collect school taxes on behalf of the school board and the province. These levies make up the total mill rate sent out on the tax bills. Portioned assessment is the value of the property multiplied by the percentage assigned by the province. For residential property, the percentage to portion is 45%. Councillor Buds went through all the details in the last council meeting. And so this evening I would like to move that bylaw number 178660, being a bylaw of the City of Portage la Prairie to authorize the levying and raising of property taxes for school and municipal purposes for the year ending December 31st, 2017, be given second reading.
Moved by Councillor Wall and seconded by Councillor Dreger. Any comments or questions on the motion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And I move that bylaw number 178660 be given third and final reading, finally passed, signed, and sealed.
Moved by Councillor Wall and seconded by Councillor Dreger. All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
The next item is a request from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to help replenish their defense fund. A little background: for the past 20 years, FCM's Legal Defense Fund has been critical in defending the national legal interests of Canadian municipalities, as well as setting precedents in important matters such as rights of way management, payments in lieu of taxes, environmental protection, and the constitutional ability of municipalities to exercise their legislative powers. FCM is consistently recognized as the sole municipal intervener with national implications, and the fund is the most certain and cost-effective way of protecting municipal legal rights in the courts of appeal. The Supreme Court of Canada, and as well as administrative bodies such as CRTC. It also supports a growing demand for FCM to seek out proactive legal opinions on emerging issues, making advice available to municipalities at much lower costs. The fund is now fully depleted, and FCM is asking municipalities to make contributions to current ongoing legal costs using a formula of 2 cents per capita. A voluntary invoice for $313.85 was received. Starting next fall, municipalities will be invited to make an annual contribution to the fund. This support is voluntary, but FCM is strongly recommending members to contribute. The recommendation is, and I so move, that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie direct administration to voluntarily support the FCM Legal Defense Fund by paying the current invoice and by making future annual contributions.
Moved by Councillor Wall and seconded by Councillor Dreger. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And we have some reports for information only. The first quarter report from the City Manager's Department and first quarter report from Corporate Services. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. City Planning and Economic Development, Councillor Dreger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have one item on the agenda this evening, and that is the first quarter 2017 report from PRED, which the Executive Director presented to us in committee 2 weeks ago, and all the information is there for Council's perusal and also the public's perusal. And that's all I have this evening.
Okay, thank you. Community Service Committee, Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have one issue to deal with tonight and a number of reports. The issue is to consider a request from PRRA to expand the Splash Island fenced area. You'll see posted the report to council as well as a letter of support from PRRA and some graphic illustration of the proposal itself. Just by way of background, a request has been received from the PRRA to expand the fenced area of Splash Island to the northwest to allow for greater green space area for patrons. The north fence line would be extended directly west, intersecting with the west fence line, which would be extended northward. There are a number of large, healthy trees in the area. Spruce trees were planted at the time of the construction of Splash Island to act as a windbreak in the northwest corner of the property. These spruce trees are now too large to relocate without significant expense, and they're not yet large enough to trim the lower branches as requested and still maintain their aesthetic appeal. They might have to be removed. Most of the deciduous trees in the area are mature, with one older tree with significant dead areas that should be removed. There are water, sewer, and hydro utilities located along the north fence line, with the hydro line potentially being in the proposed expansion area. But the fence can be located in such a way as to avoid conflict with underground utilities. The functional design for the proposed roundabout or traffic circle, which may be located at the south end of the proposed causeway, suggests that the proposed alignment of the fence will have limited or no impact on the roadway, walkway, and drainage design elements. In addition, the PRA has offered to replace any trees that had to be removed with new trees. In light of all of that, is a recommendation of administration, and the Community Services Committee would move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie authorize the expansion of the Splash Island fenced compound at the northwest corner.
Moved by Councillor Fraze and seconded by Councillor Draycott. Any questions or comments on the motion? Councillor Dreger?
This is just to create like a bigger picnic area, that kind of idea, or does it allow for more users of the pool itself?
Well, I guess that's a joint issue. The pool area is licensed, I think, for 450 people to swim, and it appears full, though, at around 300 or 350, because there's no surrounding area for parents to put their picnic blanket or whatever. So this allows more people in the enclosure at the same time, and that would allow for greater use of the pool itself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
Thank you. In addition, there's a number of reports, and as I mentioned in the committee last meeting, these are reports that have been generated by organizations or committees that are not necessarily directly part of city's operations, but certainly partners in making the city a better place to live. So these external committees have been asked to either hand in their minutes or create quarterly reports that are now posted for everyone to see what's happening in our community. So I'm pleased to present those, and you're welcome to read them at your leisure.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fraze. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall, please.
Yes, Your Worship, we have, for information only, some first quarter reports from the water treatment plant, the water pollution control facility, and from Waterworks for your review. And that's all I have there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wall. Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening we do have an amendment to traffic bylaw. The issue is to amend bylaw 01-8105 to allow for free metered parking for vehicles displaying veteran plates. So just some background on that as well. We have had some feedback in terms of parking within the city limits and asked if it was something that we would consider to have free veteran parking downtown at our meters. Many municipalities do provide veterans with free parking within their city limits. For example, the City of Brandon provides free parking at any meter for vehicles identified with a veteran license plate. Some other Canadian cities provide free parking with veteran license plates are London, New Westminster, Coquitlam, and Port Moody. And the City of Winnipeg does give owners of vehicles with veteran license plates a book of scratch meter passes that provide up to 20 hours of complimentary parking at an on-street parking meter. There are other cities that do other things within it, free parking within a certain radius of the city if you live within that radius, or there are free parking for veterans over the age of 60. And if you no longer drive over the age of 60 but you are a veteran, then you can have a permit given so that whoever is operating your motor vehicle for you, that you can benefit from that as well. Although some cities implement a permit or a voucher system for free veteran parking or with or without veteran plates, such a process would involve a cost to the city staff as well as time and actual permits or vouchers. Implementing free parking for any vehicle with a veteran plate, however, would require no further resources and would be inclusive of all veterans. So to obtain a veteran plate in Manitoba, a person must have served honorably in the Canadian Forces or the Allied Force, or in the Merchant Navy or Ferry Command during World War II or the Korean War, the Canadian Armed Forces, or for at least 3 years, the Canadian Armed Forces, for at least 3 years, or NATO operations or a UN peacekeeping force as a member of the Canadian Forces, the RCMP, or another Canadian police force or an allied force. There is a fee of $5 that's paid to the Royal Canadian Legion to confirm eligibility for a veteran license plate. And with respects to veterans from outside of Manitoba, the traffic bylaw already provides free parking for vehicles with out-of-province license plates. And so it is the recommendation that the Council of City of Portage la Prairie approve the implementation of free metered parking for vehicles with veteran license plates by giving bylaw 17-8661 first reading.
Moved by Councillor Draycott and seconded by Councillor Espy. Any comments or questions on the motion? Councillor Draycott.
I would just say that this is something that I would consider progressive for us. It was something that a citizen did bring up to us in a council meeting that I don't know that we had necessarily thought of before. And so I did want to thank administration for looking into what our alternatives could be for that. And just note that it was something that we easily resolved here after a vote if such thing passes.
And it did have the full support of the Legion. There was a small delegation that came to the last meeting, and they were present during committee when it was discussed. So. Okay, any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And other than that, I do have first quarter reports for information for transportation and engineering for the first quarter of the year, if there's any questions about that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Draycott. Public Safety Committee, Councillor Espy, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Attached are the first quarter reports for Fire Department, RCMP, and bylaw enforcement, and committee has reviewed those reports.
Okay, any questions for Councillor Espy? Okay, thank you. We have no deferred business this evening. We have no new business and no old business. So council is adjourned at 6:28 p.m. and we're going to move right into committee. And we'll call committee to order at 6:28 p.m. Finance Legislative Property Committee, Councillor Wall, please.
Yes, I have nothing to report, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. City Planning and Economic Development Committee, Councillor Dreger, please.
Yes, we have one item this evening. It's a report sent to us by PRED, and the issue is to consider a proposal that allows for access to funding for tourism and marketing initiatives for the City of Portage la Prairie, specifically to activate an ad hoc subcommittee of council that allows for transparent access to the portion of the accommodation levy intended for marketing and economic development. And I would like to invite Vern May to speak to this issue and to give us the background and analysis of it.
Thank you. Currently, there's a challenge in the way that we market Portage la Prairie, both as a destination and also in the other areas of the portfolio that are sort of under PRED's mandate. Specifically, there's a lot of gaps that we could address, and we've engaged a number of stakeholder organizations and groups that have a stake in tourism and marketing, whether they're venue managers or event promoters, to discuss a more collaborative approach to everything that we do. We've had really good feedback. In fact, the support from all of the organizations that we've talked to, and there's been more than 18 stakeholders so far, has been unanimous. And that has also included feedback and input from the hoteliers and venues that are actually paying the tax currently. What we're looking at is not to become an event promoter, as maybe PRED has in the past, but instead to look at measurable strategies to build the infrastructure around tourism related to signage, wayfinding, as well as a more unified marketing voice in print, in digital, and broadcast media. What we're looking at specifically is the development of a 5-year strategy that allows us to build year over year, looking at items such as the development and placement of billboards, implementation of improved wayfinding signage and graphic maps, refreshing the inventory of available trade show material and current photos for marketing purposes, collaboration on joint ads, such as the one that was taken out in the Winnipeg Free Press community or town and country issue on April 22nd, pursuit of star attraction status for Island Park as a whole, better nurturing and expansion of our relationship with Travel Manitoba, improved and integrated digital presence for Portage la Prairie's regional brand, and more efficient use of grant funding for hosting events locally that have a measurable economic impact. We're looking at this collectively to launch this strategy with a request to access the city's accommodation levy reserve of $50,000 per year over 5 years, geared towards these strategies. In addition to the funding that we would be looking at through this tax reserve, we have also presented the same proposal to the RM of Portage la Prairie for consideration of their accommodation levy. In April 11th, when the province released its new budget, they've also identified a new structure for tourism marketing and management. Previously, you needed to be part of a regional tourism association to access that funding. They've now changed that model, and we've already engaged Travel Manitoba to figure out how we plug into that system. We have a conference call with them next week to talk about how we can best initiate a place branding process for Portage la Prairie. We're looking at this as an opportunity to reevaluate the structure of the city's current hosting grants, which amounts to $5,000 annually, particularly as it relates to item number 8, which I just spoke to. The committee may absorb responsibility for this liaison with event promoters and organizers if they're generating additional visitation to the community through their efforts. This 5-year tourism strategy was discussed at the April 20th board meeting of PRED, and participation by the PRED Executive Director in this initiative was given full support. So I'd like to make an administrative recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the formation of an ad hoc committee assigned to manage a 5-year marketing strategy, accessing up to $50,000 per year to undertake the items as identified. This committee will be chaired by the Executive Director of PRED, an officer that is not directly affiliated with any local event, attraction, or amenity. Identification of the committee's composition and development of formal terms of reference will follow upon approval of this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. May, and that is something that we will be voting on in 2 weeks from now, but tonight I would just invite some discussion from council on this issue. And I will begin just by asking, is this $50,000 something that will be transferred to the Preds bank account by the city on an annual basis? Is that what you're asking for? I know that Pred has been very careful in saying that they're not hosting events, they're not putting on the events, but they want to be supportive of those organizations in the city that are promoting tourism within the city. So that's where my question comes from.
I do want to clarify that Pred doesn't want to manage any money that's not our own. Specifically, what we're looking at is previously there was a tourism advisory committee in place. And one of the challenges that I've heard identified to me is that this committee came up with lots of ideas, but then where things fell short was they were unable to access the funding to enact those ideas. What we want to look at with this proposal is to put the money up front so that when you get that committee together, they know what they have to work with in terms of resources and the timeline so that everybody figures out where they plug in over that 5-year plan. So the money would remain with the city and the committee would come together with a report based on the budget that's available.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Mendo had some information to add.
Just to build on Mr. May, the idea is to have a subcommittee, an ad hoc subcommittee of council. Therefore, the money would stay here and managed by the subcommittee in a sense, but come through the city budget. So no, it wouldn't be a transfer to Pred.
Okay, good. Any other comments, questions?
So currently, we there's a number of grants. There's the hosting assistant grants. So does that change any of those grants, or this is an addition to?
One of the items that we've discussed is if we're looking at accessing this and working closely with the event hosts to review the access, the hosting grant that's in place currently, and maybe that could be rolled into this process as well.
Okay. Okay. Other questions for Councillor Dreger?
Okay, so like I said, that will be an item that we'll be voting on in 2 weeks from now, and that is all that this committee has to bring forward tonight.
Okay, thank you. Community Services Committee, Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Community Services Committee has nothing on the agenda for a discussion at the next meeting.
Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall.
Nothing from Waterworks, Your Worship.
Thank you. And Transportation, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before we do dive into Transportations Committee this evening, I did want to offer some congratulations. First to Chief Carpenter and the Fire Department for holding their 37th annual bike auction this past weekend. I understand the boys had a terrific auction this weekend in spite of being very busy with calls around that bike auction, so congratulations on that. And also to Fort La Reine Museum, they opened up their season this past Friday, celebrating 50 years here in Portage la Prairie. They do have a great lineup this season, so do be sure to check them out as well. So congratulations to Fort La Reine for 50 years. So back to Transportation Committee. Next time we do meet, we will have second and third readings for the veteran parking bylaw that we just went through. And I don't imagine there's any questions on that as we just started that process last meeting. And then we go to our award of tender for our 2017 pavement program contract. And so this evening we will start the discussion about our pavement tender program. We have a couple of alternatives. There were 5 companies that did submit that tender for our pavement contract this year. The tender was advertised in the Daily Graphic, Construction Data, Winnipeg Construction Association, the city webpage, and Merrick's. And the tender closed and bids were open on April 25th, 2017. Maple Leaf Construction anticipates a start date of June 5th, 2017 if they are awarded the contract. They had the lowest bid of $994,700.18. Messington Construction Limited came in second at $1,001,358.91, followed by Borland Construction, Nelson River Construction, and Bituminix Limited. And so the 2017 pavement contract includes work for the following. We had 6th Street Northwest, Saskatchewan Avenue to rear lane, just the west parking lane. 12th Street Northwest, Saskatchewan Avenue to Gigot Avenue. Prince Avenue, 2nd Street Northeast to 3rd Street Northeast. 6th Street Northwest from Lauren Avenue to Fisher Avenue. 3rd Street Southeast, Dufferin Avenue to the Crescent Road. La Vérendrye Crescent from Phoebe Street to Campbell Place. 8th Street Northeast, Saskatchewan Avenue to Lauren Avenue. 17th Street Northwest from Gigot Avenue to McKay Avenue. 2nd Street Northwest from Lauren Avenue to Fisher Avenue. Bridge Road from Meehan Avenue to Henderson Drive. Fisher Avenue paving path, 8th Street Northwest to 6th Street Northeast. And new concrete sidewalk on 6th Avenue from 8th Street Northwest to 6th Street Northwest, and 6th Street Northwest from 6th Avenue to 7th Avenue. Island Park Playground parking lot, gravel and pavement of that, and 18th Street Northwest road construction that we began last year from McKay Avenue to Park Drive. McDonald Street, Lincoln Avenue to north of the Peony Bay was removed from our project this year due to the RM of Portage deciding not to fund their portion this year. So the province of Manitoba is not yet accepting applications for the 2017 Municipal Road Improvement Program, pending the provincial budget approval. When announced, the city will request funding for approximately $400,000, which has been the maximum available to the city in the past. The funding might not be announced until August, which is a serious concern for our paving program and the schedule of such. The funding request will cover approximately 50% of the streets as indicated, and the 2017 dust control on various streets, which is not included in this contract. The overlay program in 2017, the budget is for $366,750. The contract tender prices came in lower than the pre-tender estimates. To expend more of the available budget, the provincial funding, it is recommended that the following streets be added to the overlay program. Crescent Road West from Yellow Quill School to the city limits for $54,490, and 4th Avenue West from 8th Street Northwest to 11th Street Northwest at $57,760. The addition of these two streets will put the overlay budget in a deficit of $14,000. This deficit can be reconciled by using the $25,000 McDonald Street reconstruction budget. 18th Street road construction, it does go into a little bit more details on that. We do have gravel base work, geogrid installation, and asphalt pavement for $133,870. The supply and installation of 3 street lights, which is not included in this contract, and the upgrading of the CP rail crossing, which is also not included in this contract, but is at $335,678 for a total of $486,548 for the 18th Street Northwest road construction. The Canadian Pacific Railway has authorized the crossing upgrades to be done this year, and Transport Canada has approved the project. No formal funding agreement has been forwarded to the city at this time of the report, but they have estimated the cost to be at that $335,678. Typically, the city is responsible for 25% of the cost, so $84,000 in this case. The CPR and the federal government are expected to pay the 75%. For the 2017 budget, it includes $80,000 for the project of Fisher Avenue paving path. The tender price is $57,000. Island Park parking lot construction, the budget was for $30,000 for this project, and the tender price came in at $27,710. 6th Avenue and 6th Street Northwest, the concrete sidewalks. The budget includes $43,600 for new sidewalk construction this year, with some being done by city staff, and additional anticipated $33,600 funding from the province. And the tender price for 6th Avenue work is for $43,296. Provincial funding has not yet been approved for that project, however. Industrial Park street reconstruction, the 2017 budget included $15,000 from reserves, $15,000 from MRIP, and $30,000 from the RM of Portage. The tender price is for $48,250. If the province does not fund our municipal road improvement program or otherwise not provide the city with the funding in the amount of $400,000, the paving contract will be significantly reduced, and the unit price offered by Maple Leaf Construction would have to be renegotiated. CPR and the federal government have not yet confirmed in a formal agreement their contribution to 18th Street crossing upgrade, and the province has not confirmed active transportation funding for the sidewalk. Therefore, we do see that we have a very aggressive pavement program this year, but we do have a lot of things still up in the air with our pavement program. So it is the administrative recommendation that the Council of City of Portage la Prairie award the 2017 pavement contract as specified in tender 17 OPS 016 to Maple Leaf Construction Limited for the price of $994,718, including taxes, and that the addition of 2 more streets to the contract and an estimated cost of $112,250 be authorized to take full advantage of the anticipated provincial funding. So that is what we will be voting on next council meeting, but I definitely welcome some conversation around that this evening.
Councillor Espy?
I guess I can start. That was a lot of information, but I think the question that we've all been debating and wrestling with is, do we give this bid to Maple Leaf Construction on $1 million contract when there is a 1% difference, approximately $6,600 approximately, between Maple Leaf Construction and the local company, Messyton Construction Limited? From my chair, having looked at everything, I think the right move is to go with the second highest bidder.
Okay, other comments? Who's up next? Councillor Wall?
Thank you, Your Worship. I, too, have done a lot of thinking about this. I also contacted a lot of folks that I know around the province in the business of awarding tenders for different communities. And without exception, they all said local preference is not an option. It's not an option for several reasons. First of all, we have a policy that refers to the provincial purchasing or tendering policy, which has 11 points that they recommend be followed. The number 1 of which is no local preference. We also put ourselves at risk to not have a competitive bidding process in the future. If we award a tender on this basis to someone local, we're telling other contractors from outside the city they may as well not bother bidding. I don't think that's a good thing for our taxpayers. So after giving it much consideration, I will be leaning towards giving the contract to Maple Leaf Construction.
Okay. Other comments? Councillor Draycott.
I think it's important for us to address why administration's recommendation is the lowest bidder. Obviously, administration is here to save us as much money as they possibly can, and when you do have a lowest bidder, then that makes sense to go that way. But from my understanding, this is a Class A tender, and therefore, as Councillor Wall is referring to, it's a requirement to vote for the lowest bidder of that tender. It is slightly different than some of the other requests for proposals that we do see, as at other times there are other things that come into play besides just price. In this case, because it is Class A, it is price that would have administration recommending an outside company over our local company to do the paving program. It is also good to note that Maple Leaf has had this contract for quite a few years now, I believe, and they have done a fairly good job for us in town. So I don't think that that's necessarily what we're humming and hawing about here as to whether Maple Leaf is capable of doing that contract, but there is a small difference between the two contracts for sure. But I think it is important to note that it is a Class A contract and therefore slightly different than a request for proposal, that we have different stipulations that we set out as a community when we're requesting the tender come back. So,
Thank you, Councillor Draycott. Other questions or comments? Councillor Dreger?
I just have a question. Is there ever a cost overrun in these paving contracts? Does Maple Leaf finish the job and say, we've, just as an example, I'm sorry, but our bill is higher? How does that affect the tender? Kelly?
Ask Kelly.
Yeah, so the tender is put out based on estimated quantities of material such as asphalt. We monitor the construction as we go. So we never really experience an overrun on the budget. If there is, it's like very minor, but typically we want to finish within the budget.
Okay, other comments or questions?
This will sound slightly amateurish, but I did undertake a little of my own Google type research into the issue of local preference, and interesting that the legal advice we get was very close to what I discovered by simply Googling it. And what we do by selecting a contract other than the lowest tendered price, especially if we haven't been transparent in setting the requirements up front, is legal remedies that could be brought against us if we fail to act in good faith, which is what we'll be doing. The lost profit from the company that was not selected could be charged against us. So we open ourselves up to legal action as well.
Further comments or questions? Councillor Esty?
I don't like to put people on the spot much, but I would appreciate a perspective on this issue.
I welcome the opportunity to speak to it. I think when you look at a situation like this, we're not talking about the difference of millions of dollars. We're talking about 1% difference on a $1 million contract. Now, if we were to take a look at the contributions made by the local vendor in property taxes alone, that's well more than 1%. The contributions as a supporter of community causes, events, this is more than 1%. At some point, as a community, we need to not act in fear for what could happen in support of joint support of local business. Regardless of the existing practice is to invest 8% of your time in local business and more likely increase the local business costs, or at the time they might go back to this federal cap, which is a once-in-a-lifetime type of situation. When we fail to support that is a ripple effect to the whole community. That's not just the council level, it's the level, as well as the level of the contract level. And the local business community is
Fear. It's not in my book. If there were to be fear, it might be the other way around. I might be afraid to offend a local bidder. So that would be a different way of seeing the fear involved. I would rather see that we act on principle. The principle is that business ought to be conducted in a fair and transparent manner, and the rules are there for a reason. Local preference has never done anyone any good. If you follow the reasoning or the rationale, a local bidder ought to be able to do the contract cheaper, seeing as there's less transportation involved, as employees ought to be local. So there's no reason to be offering them a higher price for the work that somebody from outside is offering to do with the same quality. And if business is to be conducted fairly, I think you'd have to be careful with the taxpayers' dollars to spend them in the most efficient manner. No fear involved.
Well, I don't agree, but I respect your opinion. And I will say that if I had half an hour and a computer, I could find empirical evidence to support either side of that, whether there is a benefit to a local purchasing policy or not.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, well then it's my turn. You thought I was going to say it's all done. Let's move on. So we've, I think all this council has done a lot of thinking about this issue, and probably ever since the bylaw enforcement contract was awarded. And I received a few phone calls and emails from the owner of Messington Construction. I think there was a fair bit of lobbying going on in this council, and also received an email from his brother who works for Moon Construction. And you know what? They're making some good points as far as the employment created here. The debate isn't about, I don't think it's about the ability of this local company. Paul has created a first-class company out there. You know, his reopening a couple years ago, his new shop, he's expanded, he's got newer equipment. He's made a huge investment in an asphalt plant to do this kind of business. This is not our money. This is taxpayer money. Last year I decided to build a deck. I don't put it out for bids. I call my friend, my local friend. He comes over and does it. That's my money. This is taxpayers' money. We have an obligation here. And it's often talked about. It's talked about at all levels of government. The most popular thing I could do right now, and I'd be getting lots of nods from the gallery, would be to say we're going to support a local guy no matter what. Sometimes the popular thing isn't always the right thing to do. So I got curious and I dug up a few things, and some folks were here on council in August of 2014. Now, Councillor Draycott and Councillor Wall weren't. This was a local purchasing report to council done up by our last Director of Finance, and it was to provide some survey results on local purchasing, to consider a local purchasing policy, not to consider, and I can make it available to everybody here, but just a couple of things that came out of that survey at this time. Of the 18 municipalities the city surveyed, only 2 municipalities had local purchasing preferences stated in their purchasing policy. Also attached was an article. Now this goes back ways, March 31st, 2009. This was a white paper, local preference in public purchasing, risks and recommendations. There's a number of things listed. A couple of things jumped out at me. Recommendation number 1, before a municipality adopts a protectionist policies in favor of domestic or local suppliers or products, it should assess the potential impact on our domestic and local suppliers of retaliatory protectionist practices adopted by U.S. municipal institutions. So in plain local language, Messington Construction, Moon Construction, Cobb's Plumbing and Heating, many of our first-class companies do a lot of business outside the city of Portage, outside the municipality. These folks work all over the province, and they also work in Saskatchewan at times, they work in Alberta at times, and I can tell you, when I talk to other mayors, if a local purchasing policy was coming here, I can bet you that other municipalities would start looking at it too. And that cuts off potentially the kind of work that our companies can do far beyond our borders. Right now, and Paul talked to me about this, right now there's a dearth of work with what's the slowdown in Alberta and Saskatchewan. companies are hungry. They're looking for this work. They're trying to protect market share. It's very aggressive. In this particular case, the taxpayers become the winners in terms of, we saw it tonight, we saw the numbers. I've been around here years when price of oil went up, there was lots of work, and the price of paving, what we'd budget for, we could do about half it because the price had gone up so much. So again, we work for the taxpayers. This is not our money we're handling, it's the taxpayers' money, and I think we have to act accordingly. We do have a legal opinion. Everybody on council has seen it. I don't need just that legal opinion. I could talk to my colleagues a block and a half away at the RM of Portage, and currently they're embroiled in a lawsuit with this exact same company, very similar circumstances. We also have an obligation to the taxpayers we represent not to take litigation lightly. It's very, very costly, and there's a risk to your reputation when you get into these things. To me, it's a last resort. And Councillor Espy talked about fear. Well, I am fearful about putting the reputation of this community at risk. The contractor community is a very small, closely knit community. They talk. They know when you're being fair and when you're being transparent. And they know when we're not being that way. We have a process. I know there's been talk about changing the process, and maybe that needs to happen. Maybe there's something better. But until it does happen, when we put out these tenders, there was a pretty good understanding in what we expect, a pretty good understanding by the people that put together the bids on this, what we were looking for. And I think we have a responsibility to honor that. If we decide to change the system at some time in the future, that's fine, as long as we're transparent about it, we communicate that well. So I'll make this available. There's also some paper I have here on the agreement on internal trade. We're connected up. I won't go into all the details here because the province has signed on to some trade agreements the federal government has. We're often partners. You can read some of this stuff. I'll make it available to members of council. And finally, I'll conclude with the fact that I had breakfast last Thursday with the Premier, Brian Bowman, and right beside me was the president of the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, and I'm not name dropping, am I? Anyway, they didn't set me right beside the Bryans, but I was talking to the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and I brought up this subject of local purchasing, and he actually stood up and asked the Premier the question about it, and the answer he got from him was, I am a free trader. I believe in a level playing field. When I talk to business owners, that's often what I hear. I want a level playing field. I'm not asking for handouts. What I want is just the rules apply to me, same rules apply to everybody. So, needless to say, unless the earth shakes or changes or something in 2 weeks' time, I will vote to support the motion that's going to be tabled. And I'll make this information available to anybody that's interested in it. Councillor Dreger, you had a comment.
Yes, I have just one more comment, if I may. You referred to this is taxpayers' money, and you're right, and we do need to be very careful with taxpayers' money. But I would almost venture a wager at this moment that if we were to ask all the taxpayers in this community which way we should vote, I'm pretty certain of the way that they would ask us to vote.
On this one particular
on this,
contract?
No, on the whole local spending, on whatever that local spending is. That's just my comment.
Okay. Councillor Fraze?
Possibly. I kind of doubt it. If people are allowed to vote with their feet, they buy at Costco, they go to Winnipeg for dinner, they don't shop local.
But on this particular issue, then, if I could go one step further, just putting it out there.
Okay. Any further comments or questions on?
That's a whole nother debate.
That's a whole other debate, and I'm
Which
sure
I'm
we're
sure
going
we
to
will
have that.
have. I'm sure we'll have. And so that would conclude the Transportation Committee's report this evening.
And that's all. Okay.
That is all.
Thank you, Councillor Draycott, for that very brief report. Councillor Espy, Public Safety.
The Public Safety Committee has nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Well, then, before we adjourn, we are going to have a question period, and I want to say a big warm welcome to Mr. Knott. I know that you had a rough trip, but it's nice to see you back safe and sound in Portage. And I don't know if you want to, but I'll open up question period and
Thank you. Back from the dead. I noticed in today's publication of the background information leading up to tonight's meeting that there is $7.2 million set aside for 2018 for an island bridge. 2018, that's next year. Is there a date for the start of anything?
can I refer that to Mr. Braden, a rough date? Or an update on what's being done this year and then next year on the bridge?
Quote, an island bridge for $7.2 million, unquote, whatever that is.
Well, as of the budget that was recently passed, there's nothing happening this year. We would get into final design, detailed design next year, if there's a budget.
So, you know what, we better clarify that. Well, there will be a budget.
For that project?
So we don't have a date for 2018 for start of the actual construction.
No.
Okay.
I have other questions, but I take my turn.
Were there other questions? Okay, Mr. Knott?
A very quick one. I appreciate the fact that the proceedings of council are put up on video because I can access them from Australia, and I did. And I watched and listened, and it's something that council has done very well. Is this part of the PR communication strategy that council has? Just on another thing, I noticed that it came out in the mail today was one sheet to do with information, which I usually see on the newspaper, but I thought it was a separate sheet today. So is there a communication strategy for council that it's making stuff much more available in terms of information?
Well, that's part of the accessibility plan. And the handout you received, that's being delivered by Sam to every door in Portage, 5,400 doors. And that way we know that every single household will get them. And it's also at less expense to the taxpayer. So that's why we made the change from the paper to Sam delivering them.
I'm sorry, that's a change, is it?
Yeah, it was a change. It used to come, I believe, with the newspaper, and now it comes to every door, regardless whether they get a newspaper or not, it's delivered to every door.
And it's still available online.
And still available online.
Thank you. And thanks for the welcome.
You're welcome. That sounded really... other questions out there?
Yeah, Alan Adams. Quick question. I'm just wondering, how is it that City Council chooses which either an RFP or a tender process is used for deciding what kind of bids they get back from companies, whether it's a certain required document that you have to fill out for certain jobs?
Okay, good question. Would you like to go into the detail on the...
Often the tenders are by way of history, to be perfectly honest. It's always been done that way, and that's always been done this year again. Refer to the paving tender as an example. Having said that, as alluded, I believe, by Councillor Draycott, is that we will be reviewing our procurement policy as it relates to tendering, whether it's a straight Class A tender or a request for proposal. There'll be more research done on that, and hopefully some proposals or policy change in June.
That leads me to another question now. Back in 2010, meters used to be a tender process. What was the decision to change that to an RFP?
I wasn't here in 2010. When I issued the request for proposal in 2013, 12, I just decided to go with an RFP. There was no rhyme or reason. That's what I chose.
So when it comes to a tender, it can be not awarded, as in this case with Messitins.
Sorry, not awarded?
Yes.
There was a tender that was re-tendered recently, and that was for lime at the water treatment plant. There was one bid, and it was substantially above our budget. We didn't budget enough money to award it to that bidder, and we re-tendered it and got 2 bids and a price below our budget.
Okay. Back in 2010, when the process for meters was under tender, I was at the fire hall for the opening of the bids. We were the lowest bid then, and the tender was not awarded, and it was extended to the current company. Was there anybody on council for that?
I was on council in 2010.
It was to the Edmonton-based company, I believe.
Sorry?
It was extended 2 more years to the Edmonton-based company.
Okay. We'd have to do some research and find out.
Yeah.
2010.
Correct.
Unless Chief Carpenter has a recollection of that.
I believe it was when you guys were in the process of incorporating animal control bylaw. And that's why you said you wanted to extend it rather than award it. Sounds right.
That's what I recollect. I don't remember the exact reason why.
I'm just, basically, it just seems, I understand there's certain process and stuff, and then from the public's view, it looks like the being local is a downfall. With it being a tender process before, we were saying here tonight that basically there's no vote. If it's a tender process, you have to give it to the lowest bidder. I was in that position once and never got it. Then it got changed to an RFP, which allows for a different process in determining who gets the contract. It just, being local seems to be a negative thing as of late. So.
So I think it's safe to say some consistency and communicating that would be appreciated by anybody that's bidding on tenders. Further questions from the gallery?
Are you allowed to talk, or you have to send in a...
No, this is question period, so you're answered your...
Okay.
But it has to be
In the form of a...
It has to be a question. It can be a question on almost anything, but...
Why do you on your contract say highest bid not necessarily, or lowest bid not necessarily accepted? Why does it even say that?
Well,
I ran into it last year with the city land deal. Now Messington is running into it with, we don't know where we stand as business around town here.
I think what it says is lowest or only bid not necessarily accepted.
I forget what it says.
Lowest or any tender, not necessarily accepted.
My understanding was, it's quite some time ago, that if you had, somebody had the lowest tender, and this wouldn't apply to Knight's example, but they'd never done that kind of work before. Do they have a reference from some other municipality? Somebody'd never done paving before. In this case, both companies have a pretty good record on paving as far as I know. That might be a circumstance where it applies. The example that Councillor Wall gave, where the product that was looked at came in, what was it, double the budget? Or double what had been expected?
It was considerably more.
Considerably more. So that was the only bid, but it was put out for tenders again, and it did come in lower.
Yeah, but that leads me to the question for local business is so important to local payroll, local, what's coming back from a local company or a local farmer that I got rejected on $800 last year on a deal. Our payroll and all our expenses are all coming for 80% back into all your people here that live here. So you're saying we want to save taxpayers dollars, but there's so much more tax being paid by local companies versus outside companies. I really want you guys to start seeing this and think about this major deal for $6 measly thousand. And just think about it, people. And don't be fear of, because you do have in your contracts, you do have, say, lowest bid, not necessarily.
Okay, well,
But anyway,
that's a good,
that's the point.
it's a good point that you raised, and I think we can clarify that statement because we did get a legal opinion on that. Would you like to share that with?
That statement actually is meaningless, again, based on we've done contracts or we've done tenders the same way for the last 25 years, and that's what was accepted 25 years ago, and case law and other judgments have come down, and basically the courts have said, unless you have a very good reason not to take the lowest tender based on a Class A tender, that you are bound by that lowest tender. Now, what would constitute a good reason? If, as the mayor said, if the lowest bidder had never done paving, as an example, right? But he's the lowest bidder, but he's never done paving, then that would be a good reason to say you can go to the second lowest bidder. At least they've got some history and some experience in that field. Just the fact that, fortunately, the fact that the person comes from Portage la Prairie is not a good reason, and it's very clear in many case laws that we've looked at. The courts have not respected that. And all the reasons that have been explained here by the different councillors and yourself are all good, valid reasons, but the courts don't see that way. And that's what council will have to make a decision on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further questions? Mr. Knott, you've got at least one more coming. You've been away for a while.
2 weeks from now, Stride.
Okay, fair enough. Last call for questions. Anybody else out there? Okay, well then, committee is adjourned at 7:38 p.m. Thank you for coming out, everybody.